Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I consider myself a decent person, the type who returns wallets found on the street and holds doors open for strangers. My mom raised me that way, and even though life hasn't always been kind to me, I try to stick to those principles. I work at a small accounting firm in town. Every Monday on my lunch break, I grab a burger from this place called the Purple Cow. It's a local joint with decent food and reasonable prices. That's where this whole mess started. I was walking across the parking lot after finishing my lunch when I spotted something shiny near a puddle. At first, I thought it was just some trash, but as I got closer, I realized it was a smartphone. A pretty expensive one too, from the looks of it. I picked it up and wiped it off with my sleeve. The screen was cracked a bit in the corner, but otherwise it seemed fine. When I pressed the power button, it lit up showing only 12% battery. My first thought was that whoever lost it would probably be calling it soon, but with such low battery, they might not be able to reach it before it died. I figured the right thing to do was to take it home, charge it up, and wait for the owner to call. That way, they'd actually have a chance of getting their phone back. I drove home, plugged the phone in, and went about my business. I had the afternoon off, so I caught up on some laundry and watched a bit of TV while waiting for the phone to ring. About 2 hours later, it finally did. I answered with what I thought was a friendly greeting. I started to tell the caller that I had found their phone in the Purple Cow parking lot, but they cut me off before I could finish. The caller immediately started yelling, demanding to know who I was and where his phone was. His tone was hostile and accusatory. I tried again to explain that I had found the phone in a parking lot and had taken it home to charge because the battery was almost dead. I attempted to tell him I could arrange to return it, but he wouldn't let me finish. The caller called me a thief and used several curse words. His voice got louder with each insult, and he called me a piece of something very rude. I had to hold the phone away from my ear because he was so loud. I defended myself, explaining that I hadn't stolen anything and was just trying to help him get his property back. That's when he threatened me. He said he was tracking his phone right now, and when he found me, he would do something violent to me that involved reaching up a certain body part and pulling out my internal organs. His exact words were much cruder. At this point, my good intentions evaporated. I asked him if he was seriously threatening me after I had taken time out of my day to make sure he got his phone back. He continued his verbal assault, calling me thieving scum and demanding to know my location. His voice was filled with rage. That was the moment I decided this person didn't deserve my kindness. Not only was he ungrateful, but he was abusive. I remained calm, though my blood was boiling. I told him I had been planning to meet him somewhere convenient to return his phone, but since he'd been so charming, I had changed my mind. He asked what I meant by that, still using foul language. I explained to him that his phone now had a full charge, so he should be able to track it easily. To give him a head start, I told him it would be somewhere off Highway 112 eastbound between Pete's Highway and the Jubin exit, and wished him good luck finding it. He started to protest, but I hung up before he could finish. Then I did exactly what I told him I would do. I drove out to the highway, rolled down my window, and tossed the phone as far as I could into some tall grass along the roadside. Was it petty? Absolutely. Did he deserve it? I think so. As I drove home, I wondered if he'd actually try to find it. The area where I threw it was pretty vast, with lots of grass and underbrush. The phone would be like finding a needle in a haystack, even with tracking. And part of me hoped he'd spend hours searching through the mud and weeds, thinking about how his own attitude had caused this whole situation. The next day, I was scrolling through social media and saw a post in our local community group. It was him complaining about how someone had stolen his phone and then thrown it away. He left out the part about threatening me. Several people in the comments suggested he should have been more polite to whoever found his phone. One comment said, "Maybe next time say, 'Thank you,' instead of making threats." I didn't respond to the post. There was no point in continuing the drama, but I did take a screenshot, just in case he ever somehow figured out who I was and tried to cause trouble. It's been 2 weeks now, and I haven't heard anything more about it. I sometimes wonder if he ever found his phone or if it's still out there, slowly being reclaimed by nature. Either way, I hope he learned something about gratitude and basic human decency. Would I do it again? Probably not. Despite everything, I still believe in doing the right thing. But I also believe that everyone has a breaking point, and being threatened for an act of kindness was definitely mine. For the record, if anyone reading this ever loses their phone and someone calls to say they found it, maybe start with thank you instead of threats. I'm a private person who owns a large forested property at the edge of our suburban area. Most of my neighbors respect boundaries, but then there's the woman who runs our homeowners association, a nightmare who thinks she owns everything and everyone. My story begins 3 years ago when I inherited this property from my grandfather. It's about 5 acres of woodland that sits next to our subdivision. Grandpa was a forest ranger before he retired, and this little patch of wilderness was his pride and joy. When he passed, I wanted to keep it exactly as he had. The problem started almost immediately after I moved in. The Homeowners Association president took interest in my property, even though it wasn't even part of the association's jurisdiction. My land predated the subdivision and was exempt from their rules, something she refused to accept. At first, it was little things. Letters about trimming trees near the property line, complaints about wildlife wandering from my forest into the lawns of the subdivision. But then she started coming onto my property uninvited, taking photos, and leaving notes pinned to trees about violations I needed to correct. I put up no trespassing signs. I installed a fence where my property met the subdivision. I even had my lawyer send her a cease and desist letter. Nothing worked. She would just wait until I was at work and then sneak onto my land. That's when I decided to set up the bear traps. Now, before you judge me, these weren't designed to seriously injure anyone. My grandfather had used them to study the local wildlife. They were modified with dulled teeth and weakened springs, meant to hold but not severely injure. Their main purpose was to keep bears from wandering too close to human settlements. I set them up deep in my property with clear warning signs all around them. I also sent a certified letter to every house in the subdivision, including hers, warning about the traps and explaining they were for wildlife management. I included a map showing where they were placed, all deep within my property, far from any walking paths. It happened on a Saturday morning. I was inside working on some home repairs when I heard the scream. I heard the Homeowners Association president shouting for help. Her cries echoed through the woods. I rushed outside and followed the sound into the woods. About 100 yards in, well past my property markers and warning signs, I found her with her leg caught in one of the traps. Her husband was beside her, trying to open the mechanism. The Homeowners Association president accused me of trying to kill her. I asked what she was doing on my property and pointed out the warning signs she had ignored. Her husband ignored my questions and begged me to help him get the trap off her leg. I knelt down and released the trap. It had caught her leg unpleasantly, but there was just some bruising and a small cut. Nothing serious. I told her that she needed to get the wound cleaned up, but she would be fine. The Homeowners Association president rejected this, claiming she was bleeding to death and demanding someone call 911. Her husband was already on the phone. I tried to explain that the trap wasn't designed to cause serious injury, but she kept screaming about lawsuits and having me arrested. The emergency medical technicians arrived quickly. They weren't too concerned until she kept insisting something was wrong. They took her away in the ambulance, with her husband following in their car. 3 days later, the police visited me. What had seemed like a minor injury had developed complications. The trap had damaged some nerves and blood vessels in her leg. Surgery had been required, and while they saved her leg, she would have a permanent limp. The officer told me that the Homeowners Association president wanted to press charges against me for setting dangerous traps. I told the officer I had documentation of everything. The traps were legally placed on my property with proper signage, and I had sent written notices to everyone in the neighborhood, including her. I had kept all the certified mail receipts as proof. I showed the officer all my paperwork, including the cease and desist letters documenting her repeated trespassing, the wildlife management plan my grandfather had established with the county, and the receipts from the warning letters. The officer said I had covered all my bases and noted that she was definitely trespassing. He would include all this in his report. The Homeowners Association president tried to sue me, but it went nowhere. The judge dismissed the case after my lawyer presented evidence of her repeated trespassing despite multiple warnings. The fact that I had modified the traps to be less dangerous and had documented everything worked in my favor. The Homeowners Association elected a new president the following month. I rarely see the former president anymore, but when I do, she walks with a limp and crosses to the other side of the street. The new president respects my property boundaries, and we've developed a good working relationship on issues that affect both the subdivision and my land. I don't feel good about what happened. Nobody should get hurt like that. But after years of harassment and trespassing, despite every effort to stop it, I got out of this free of legal problems. Boundaries exist for a reason. My wife and I started our balloon decoration company after years of doing it as a side gig for friends' parties. People kept telling us our designs were incredible, and eventually we took the leap. Our company philosophy is simple: create beautiful memories for clients while providing meaningful work for people who might struggle in traditional employment. We hire folks with various backgrounds, some who needed second chances, others who just didn't fit into corporate America. It worked beautifully, except for that one time with the employee I'll call Karen. Karen came to us with an impressive resume and charming interview persona. She talked about customer service being her passion and how she loved working in collaborative environments. My wife had a slight hesitation about her, but I was eager to fill the sales position, so we brought her on board. The problem started almost immediately. Our sales team consisted of 3 people who worked together to handle client inquiries. Karen, however, had her own system. She'd hover near the business phone and dive for it whenever it rang, especially if the call seemed to be from a potential high-value client. One day, a coworker confronted Karen about taking a call the coworker had been waiting for. Karen dismissed the complaint, claiming she got to the phone first, and accused the coworker of just sitting around texting. When the coworker explained they were actually sending a quote to a client, Karen brushed them off and said she needed to take the call. These interactions happened daily. If someone confronted her, she'd immediately come to my office. During these visits, Karen would complain that the other salespeople were creating a hostile environment and sabotaging her work. When I asked for examples, she'd deflect by suggesting the others were jealous of her bringing in bigger clients. She often complained about our hourly pay structure, arguing she deserved commission since she claimed to do more work than others. What Karen didn't mention was how often she messed up orders. She'd enter wrong colors, incorrect delivery addresses, or miss details about event timing. Then she'd either blame someone else or minimize the problem. When I confronted Karen about a missing balloon arch at the Singh wedding, she immediately blamed the delivery person, claiming they must have forgotten to set it up despite her entering everything correctly. Later I found she had actually scheduled the delivery for the wrong day. Our company gives all sales team members access to our QuickBooks system to create invoices and bill clients. It streamlines our process and prevents bottlenecks. With Tuesday afternoon, my sales manager came into my office looking uncomfortable. The sales manager told me that Karen had been caught accessing the HR section of QuickBooks to look at everyone's pay information. When I asked why, the manager explained that Karen had told another coworker she wanted to know the manager's salary to use when asking for a raise. I laughed because of the absurdity. We've always been transparent about finances in our company. Anyone who asks can see what everyone makes, including my wife and me. We share profit margins, debt, everything. It's part of our philosophy that everyone should understand the business they're helping to build. So the next morning, I asked our bookkeeper to print everyone's pay rates. I taped the sheet right on the main whiteboard where everyone could see it. When Karen walked in and saw it, her face went through a transformation: shock, embarrassment, and then anger. Karen immediately questioned why I would post private salary information. I explained that I've always been happy to share financial information with anyone who asks, so now nobody needed to snoop in QuickBooks. When Karen tried to claim she was just learning the system, I responded that she had now learned about our commitment to transparency. Karen spent the rest of the day looking angry at me. Other team members either didn't care or were amused by the whole situation. Over the next few weeks, Karen's attitude worsened. She started making even more mistakes, coming in late and treating co-workers with hostility. After she made a new delivery person cry, I knew it was time. When I told Karen that it wasn't working out and today would be her final day, she protested that I couldn't fire her because she was the top salesperson. I had to explain that she actually had the highest error rate and had violated our most important workplace value, kindness. Karen argued that kindness doesn't pay bills and only results matter. I responded by saying that in our company, how we treat each other matters more than any sale, and her final check would be ready tomorrow. After she left, the whole office atmosphere changed. People laughed more, collaboration increased, mistakes decreased. It was like a dark cloud had lifted. I created a new document titled Who We Are and posted it on that same whiteboard. It outlined our company values, promised continued wage transparency, and featured one sentence in all capital letters: no mean people. We've hired multiple people since then, and that rule has never been broken again. Our business has thrived, not just financially, but as a community. QuickBooks access is now restricted to managers, and we use different software for billing, but our commitment to transparency remains. Sometimes the most important business lesson isn't about profit margins or growth strategies. It's simply about not letting mean people poison what you've built. I take pride in my ribs. They fall off the bone and make you close your eyes when you take that first bite. I've spent years perfecting my technique, the right rub, the perfect smoke ring, that sticky sweet glaze that gets all over your fingers. When the neighborhood potluck barbecue came around last summer, I was ready to show off a little. The day was great. Clear blue skies, a light breeze, and cold beer was good company. I arrived with my cooler packed with pre-prepped ribs, my special sauce, and confidence. But that confidence dropped the moment I stepped into the backyard. There he was, standing over the massive grill like some guardian of the flame. I'll just call him Mr. Entitled since he acted like one. He was flipping burgers with dramatic flourishes, spatula waving in the air. When I approached with my cooler, he looked me up and down. He stopped me, asking what I thought I was doing. I explained I was bringing my ribs over to get them started. He laughed and told me that wasn't how things worked. He said he was manning the grill and explained his system, one dish at a time, his going first. He added that when he finished, maybe I could have my turn. I looked at the grill. It was huge with enough space to cook for an army. I pointed out how big the grill was and suggested I could use a small section since my ribs needed time. He refused, repeating it was one dish at a time, according to his rules. He turned back to his burgers, dismissing me. I wanted to argue, but the host was nearby, and I didn't want to cause trouble. So I nodded and stepped back, watching as Mr. Entitled took his time with his burgers. I waited, drinking my beer while he flipped and fussed. People started eating, grabbing his burgers and sides others had brought. The sun beat down, and I felt sweat on my back, partly from the heat but also from the plan forming in my mind. Finally, he wiped his hands on his apron and told me it was all mine now, adding I shouldn't mess it up. I smiled and made my move. Here's what he didn't know. I wasn't starting from scratch. That morning I'd given my ribs the first part of the 3-2-1 smoking method, 3 hours of low and slow smoking at home. They weren't fully cooked, but had a head start, wrapped tight and ready to finish. I fired up the grill, adjusted the heat, and placed my ribs on the grates. Then came my secret weapon, a small foil tray of soaked applewood chips that I put in the corner. Within minutes, beautiful smoke began curling up around the ribs. The effect was immediate. Heads turned, conversations paused, noses lifted to the air. One guest asked what that smell was. Another said it was incredible. People began moving toward the grill, drawn by the smoky aroma. I brushed some sauce on the ribs, pretending not to notice the audience. I mentioned they were just ribs that take time, and I hoped nobody minded. Mr. Entitled was nearby eating one of his burgers, but I saw his expression change as people left the food table to gather around me and my ribs. He shouted that I was smoking out his grill. I looked up, I reminded him of his own rule, one dish at a time, and said I was just following what he'd established. I flipped a rib, releasing another cloud of smoke. The crowd liked it. Mr. Entitled pushed his weight closer. He tried to insert himself, offering to help and show me a better technique. I declined his help, reminding him that my turn was still going, just as he had said. Then I really took my time. I tended to each rib with attention. I explained low and slow cooking to my audience. I adjusted the chips for more smoke. I applied more sauce, building layers of flavor, all while Mr. Entitled watched. The whole process took over 1 hour. By then, Mr. Entitled was forgotten. His burger tray sat neglected, the patties cold. Meanwhile, my ribs were the hit of the party. When I finally declared them done, people rushed to grab a portion. The host told me they were incredible, and the best he'd ever had. Another guest said I'd ruined all other barbecue for them. The host patted my shoulder as the party wound down, saying I owned the grill next time. I agreed that sounded good. I caught Mr. Entitled's eye as he stood by the drinks table. He knew what had happened. I'd used his own rule against him. Did I prep those ribs in advance to show him up? Yes. Was it petty? Without a doubt. Was it worth it to watch him deal with his own rule while everyone enjoyed my food? It was. Revenge doesn't have to be served cold. It could be smoked low and slow with just the right amount of heat. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.